but they never know desire. Well, this takes us back to the idea that modernity is failing on its own terms. And let's just take a look at this. And this can sometimes be a good basis for arguments with people who are really buying into the modern project. If their entertainment industry, whether or not it's part of the enormous pornography industry or not, it's not really relevant, is based on making the most private aspects of our humanity and our bodies there in HD for increasingly younger generations to feed off, and people are making a lot of money out of that. And increasingly the most private things are becoming public, and this is a transformation that has happened over the last few years. They valorize desire. Well, so do we, so does every traditional culture, except for those sort of killjoy, some of the Buddhists, some of the Christians who think that it's all sin. But generally, world civilizations, sacred civilizations, valorize it as being a divine gift. But what we would then say is, well, look at the fact that, for instance, testosterone rates are dropping by 1% a year in the United States. They don't like to hear that. They think they're the civilization of desire and pleasure, and religionists, especially Muslims, are buttoned up killjoys. Tell them that this is just a medical fact. You can go on the website of the World Health Organization and check it out. In modern societies, desire is diminishing. In modern societies, desire is diminishing. So the average Egyptian, I looked this up, male, has twice the testosterone levels of the average American. If you tell a lot of Americans who think they're kind of red-blooded bikers that, they get really freaked out because they think they're the society of pleasure. Not the case. It just is not the case. And this steady diminution, which is one reason for gender dysphoria and one possible reason for people experimenting with alternative sexualities and this strange leveling, is something that is known. Nobody's quite sure why it should be. Well, explore with your atheist friend who thinks that believers don't like to have fun some of the explanations. Some of the medical journals say it's to do with estrogen pollution caused by all those millions of women who are on the pill releasing these female hormones into the water supply and therefore diminishing what is specifically male in men who are drinking water from the water supply. Possibly. Estrogen is very powerful, and there's even indications that it's affecting the animal kingdom as well. One possible explanation. Another explanation is laptops and mobile phones. That they emit certain powerful forms of radiation that are supposed to diminish testosterone and other hormonal dimensions of male desire. They don't like to be told that either. Another thing is pornography. One of the major causes of sexual dysfunction in the modern world is pornography addiction. And there's some very fundamental things that happen to the brain amongst people who are regularly using pornography that are actually really scary, and you can Google it and see how profound that aberration is. We're really not designed to be voyeurs of those things at all. It really profoundly affects the brain. It's another thing liberals in particular don't like to be told, but one is using the language of medical science. Other things, it seems to have to do with a more general dysfunction in maleness. The decline of traditional forms of maleness which are rooted in male hormones and the endocrinal system. And the increase, for instance, in autism. Male autism continues to go up. It's a pretty severe dysfunction a lot of the time. It continues to rise. Why? Not sure. Relationship difficulties, all of these issues, clearly there are social dimensions to it as well, which reminds us of something that should be obvious to people of fitra. The further you move from traditional normative understandings of how the genders relate to each other, the more fundamental spiritual, even physiological dysfunctions will be in both genders. And this, again, is something that even the secular world is noting. So, for instance, another fun book that just came out, nothing to do with an Islamic perspective, Laurie Gottlieb, maybe sisters in particular should look at this. She calls her book Marry Him, The Case for Mr. Good Enough. Okay, what she discovers is the more men perform feminine tasks at home, the less frequently they make love. There's something about doing specifically female tasks, according to traditional stereotypes, that actually reduces the male capacity for desire. So her conclusion is, in an attempt to be gender neutral, we have become gender neutered. And there's an increasing awareness in the West that there's a crisis going on, and it's an irony. The society that thought it was liberating desire in the 1960s with the hippies and Woodstock and free love is actually producing a world in which desire is diminishing quite steadily. An example of secularity defeating its own purposes. It's a kind of Ghazalian argument, tahafut. You could speak of tahafut al-hadatha, if you liked, the mutual contradiction, the incoherence of modernity. It promises something, abandon those puritanical old buttoned-up religious ways, and enjoy and party instead. The reality is the parties are not such fun. And this is another important way in which we can push back against the gender dysphoria of the modern world and the insistence that traditional roles are not normal to the human species. That which is normal, that which is normative, is endlessly contested. Some of our values, some of the values that we choose are to do with enculturation, certainly, but they were also ultimately grounded in a physiology. And as the religion of fitrah, that roots our religion and our obedience to God in bodily practices and even hygienic practices, this is really important. But alhamdulillah, we should be able to escape many of these modern problems. So that's what this contention is about, and it's really contentious. People don't like to be told that in their hedonistic society they're not, they don't have much desire any longer, but feel sorry for the moderns, for they never know desire. Now we're moving on to